Analog horror is not something I've interacted with much outside of Vita Carnis, Local 58, and Squimpus McGrimpus FNAF series. But Angel Hare to me is special since I personally never watched any videos about it, and it's not in that category. It's a mystery about strange entities that claim to be angels coming into the main character's life, and while I seriously love my time watching this interesting story unfold, I've got some serious issues with it that keep me from calling it incredible. But what even is Angel Hare? Overview. Angel Hare is a 2022 animated series created by the YouTube channel The East Patch. They're indie animators and writers that of course made Angel Hare, but they also made other things like Rot and their parody of Angel Hare, Your Angel's Here. Angel Hare itself is a very complicated mystery series where we're tasked with trying to understand what's going on via the puzzle pieces and hints we're given. This review assumes you've already watched Angel Hare once or that you have a grasp of what happens in it, since a simple summary of each season can't communicate the depth of things that happen within it. I'd have to make an entirely different video analyzing the story so that this video wouldn't be bloated since I get into some really specific criticisms in this one. So with that out of the way, I want to first talk about Angel Hare's great aspects since it's still a really good web series, and its greatest one has to be the dialogue plus characterization positives. My feelings on this show's characterization and dialogue as a whole is a mixed bag, but it's no doubt great at using subtle dialogue to characterize people like Zagzagael and Camael well. Despite Camael only coming in at season 3 and having little to no foreshadowing aside from season 1 episode 5.5 at 135, they're the best implemented character as almost every single one of his lines has a double meaning, like when they say,
"Sometimes it's best for both parties to stay separate."
In season 3 episode 4.5. I'll focus more on how great of a character Camael is later, but because of how complicated a lot of the lines are, this show never gives you a chance to deep down feel as if the angels are actually angels. Zagzagael channels this energy the best as his entire introduction with him unpausing Jonah's broadcast are extremely alarming lines like in season 2 episode 2 where he says,
"Sharing something important lets others learn about what makes you tick."
Makes him actually creepy, especially because it's clear that Zagzagael does have the ability to influence reality since Gabby was able to do so. Simple lines say a lot about each of the characters in this series, and everyone's characterized like this aside from Gabby, but that's fine because of her function in the story. How characters speak in reference to things is also very realistic, but we get enough information from it to use what they say and come to our own conclusions. Season 2 episode 6's scene where Zagzagael tells Francis to
"Say something, Fran, do the call,"
isn't ever explained because the angels and friends already know what that's referring to, which forces us to think about what the call even is. And things like Zag referring to the guy on the outside in the same episode are simple and we never come back to it, but it implies that Gabby and Zagzagael have teamed up at one point before Jonah with someone like Jonah.
"What? You want a guy on the outside again?"
The implementation of certain cryptic phases could have been far more relevant, and some are really damaging to the whole show since everything these characters say has so much weight. But now I want to speak on the high artistic quality. Wild Hare, Angel Hare, and Herrings on the Rocks look exactly like shows and games from their time. The cheap, stilted animation in Angel Hare tells us that it was a niche show that not many kids got to watch. Wild Hare's animation is just like a cartoon from its time period, and Herrings on the Rocks being a point-and-click adventure game all fit the analog style the series is going for. Because, like its presentation, these properties within the world of Angel Hare are old. These qualities that might have just felt cheap, silly, or gimmicky outside of the context of a highly disturbing mystery that, at least in season 1, focusing on a childhood tragedy, makes them stand out and work wonderfully throughout all 3 of these seasons. It's definitely why people mistakenly call this an analog horror when really, it's just using that format because the games and shows Jonah deals with are old like the format. Musically, the show exceeded my already high expectations, especially on a third watch. I seriously love season 3's soundtrack as it added so much to the sad and lonely atmosphere it wanted to create. It was an element that fully felt appropriate and lonely for Camael's character arc, and outside of that, some of the songs are even relevant to piecing together what exactly is even happening in the story. The lyrics to season 1 episode 4 song at the very start say, "Although I love you, it's goodbye." But at the end they say, "But I forget I ever saw your face." This is massively relevant to season 1's main plot as it offers more evidence and a clear line of events that happened within that season. Those being that Jonah killed his abusive father and Gabby ended up making him forget about it, which is a detail we concretely get in season 2 episode 6 when Jonah says to Gabby, "You should make me forget again." The show's amazing visual and auditory quality is something that everyone who watches this should appreciate because it's easily one of its greatest qualities that help a lot with the presentational effectiveness. It might be a bit awkward to phrase this positive element of Angel Hare like this, but what I mean is that when Angel Hare is trying to make you feel a certain way, it does so with ease. I've got a ton of logical issues with what happens in Season 2 Episode 6's ending, but despite all of them, the music, characters, emotions, great art, and mood of the scene all perfectly come together and make a powerful atmosphere where it feels as if all of that just doesn't matter. Just an episode before it, Zagzagael referred to who supposedly his great friend Gabby as your little rabbit friend in a manipulative way to Jonah.
Think about your little rabbit friend and really ask.
But then in this one, when he calls out to her and wants to help her, even though he used disrespectful and suspicious language just an episode prior, I felt for him. Season 3 does this even better, which is why I want to dedicate an entire section to analyzing what it does correctly, since it's truly one of the best pieces of writing I've ever seen in a web series. Season 3. I used to think that Season 3 was the worst, but after a lot of thinking, I've come to the opposite conclusion. Its consistent tone, focus on Camael's loneliness, manipulative tendencies, and characterization make me feel so much for them in a way that I didn't for anyone else. And it's impressive since we only get 2 episodes, those being Season 3 Episode 5 and 6 of Camael directly speaking to our characters, but by then we already knew him because of what was revealed and his dialogue beforehand. My favorite part of him is his influence on Segan in a dichotomy between Segan and Jonah, and Camael and his friend. It stems from Camael's line in Season 3 Episode 4.5,
It can be hard to see old connections again, and how to mend them depends entirely on what broke them in the first place. Is there trust to reestablish? Resentment to pull out and address together? Sometimes it's best for both parties to stay separate. But the best relationships can be worth working for. It really depends.
He says this because his friend, who was his friend, quit working with him to go do something else. And it reveals a lot about how Cam personally can't bring himself to forgive his friend for leaving, even though he acknowledges that broken relationships when fixed are the best. But because the resentment Camael has for his friend clouds his judgment, he pushes it onto Segan by constantly bringing up his childhood with Jonah since Jonah wronged him. Segan could have certainly gotten over what happened to him when he was a kid because he acknowledges his childhood grudges as stupid, but because Camael keeps bringing it up, he can't. And he decides to not even pick up Jonah's calls until the end when he finally forgives him since he had time to himself to think about it without the influence of Camael. In the end, Segan stops having resentment for Jonah and they become great friends, but for Camael it isn't like this. He doesn't have the chance to try and reestablish the friendship he had with his friend, and so for him, he has to accept that it's best for both parties to stay separate, in this specific instance since he also said,
It really depends
on what broke the relationship in the first place. Camael, especially after he pushes resentment on not only Segan but also Jonah, realizes that he has to try and better himself before he can come back and potentially interact with his friends in a healthy way again. Despite all the criticisms I have for the season, it's genuinely wholesome, deep, complicated and well written, and it takes a few rewatches and a lot of thought before you can actually appreciate it. So it's why Season 3 is now my favorite one. I could have gone into a lot more depth, but if anything, at least watch Season 3 of Angel Hare because man is it amazing. Positives. Conclusion. I like Angel Hare for a lot more reasons, and I respect it for attempting to go in unique directions unseen in a series of this nature, but I don't have enough points in order to make a full cohesive section for all those reasons, and this video is more about the story. You should watch it if you haven't, but despite everything I said, I still can't say it's great or a masterpiece or flawless for so many reasons. And my biggest one has to do with the main mystery. But since this is such a complex show, and it's a type where people can come to a lot of different conclusions, I think that lining out my basic yet still in-depth criticisms first makes more sense than immediately talking about the mountain that'll come near to the end of the video. Quick methodology. Since I'm criticizing a mystery show, I'm basing every critique and conclusion I come to off of what the show most clearly supports with evidence. I'll bring the deep evidence up later, but that's how I'm operating here. And hey, if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and becoming a member to see early videos. With that clarified, I want to speak on the tone. Angel Hare has a dark tone, but it never fully commits to everything that the tone implies or causes. Season 1, if you didn't know, is about Jonah being pushed into killing his abusive father by Gabby and forgetting about it due to Gabby removing his memory. It's dark up until the last episode, which is extremely cheerful and happy with no foreshadowing. Season 1 episode 5 establishes the fact that his mom went through some seriously screwed up things mentally and worried a lot for Jonah because of what Gabby made him do. So when in 6 the reunion is happy, it feels like a strange shift as opposed to something natural or right. We're supposed to push aside all of our suspicions suddenly and accept what it's telling us. even though everything before this moment tells us that Gabby's a dangerous, unknown entity that can impact the real world. Even though Jonah wants answers to what happened in his childhood, we don't get anything about this, and at most, off-screen we can conclude that Gabby just told him that she caused him to forget what happened, since Jonah asked her if she can make him forget again. If Jonah was just told everything about his childhood by Gabby off-screen, that'd be unsatisfying and lame because that's one of the main things we as an audience also wanted to know, due to the story's main mystery in Season 1 being exactly that. Season 2 paints Zagzagael as highly untrustworthy by simply saying things like,
"Sharing something important lets others learn about what makes you tick,"
in Season 2 Episode 2, or him doing things like changing the script to say,
"Respect and penitence gives us the wisdom to face every challenge. It may not make us obviously wise, but it can give us common sense when we need it,"
while looking at Jonah. These things can't be interpreted as anything but "this is untrustworthy." This also isn't mentioning his ultimatum in Season 2 Episode 5, which I'll speak more on in his specific section. Season 3 is way more internally consistent when it comes to the tone, but in terms of everything else before it, it doesn't make that much sense. We go from the horrifying implications of Season 1 to the uncomfortableness Zagzagael's presence puts onto Jonah in Season 2 to the sad but wholesome vibe of Season 3. But Season 3 is damaged by the previous two because the tones and implications the last two introduced aren't ever answered for. None of this is ever answered for, so when it shifts tone, it doesn't feel right because we're still like, hold on, didn't blank do or say this? Are we just not going to mention that? Red herrings plus inconsistencies. Angel Hare has a lot of red herrings and inconsistencies when you really pay attention, and they mostly appear in Season 2. Red herring wise, the most annoying one to me personally is when in Season 2 Episode 0, Francis paints the Ouroboros and a few other things like a bunny with an X on its head and a skull with a halo. I thought this imagery would have some kind of relevance, more specifically the Ouroboros, because it's specifically a pagan symbol. Paganism is antithetical to Christianity, and Angel Hare in-universe is a Christian show, so I thought that this was just another hint that there's something wrong happening here, but that doesn't end up being true. The meaning of the Ouroboros, that being its symbolization of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, also has nothing at all to do with the show unless you get into some kind of insane speculation. There are a few other clues that have questionable relevance, like at 3:10 of Season 1 Episode 5.5, where Gabby reads a note from a person named Nathan that says, "Gabby, I asked this, what did you do?" We don't hear from Nathan again, but it confirms that Gabby probably did something, and it implies that she could read the letters if she wanted to, but for some reason she doesn't, which is something that's never answered for. But a lot of irrelevant clues relate to Francis actually. Francis' drawings that are influenced by Gabby, and Gabby acting like a Christ-like figure for Francis, both are things that point to what she could potentially be, but they in the end go nowhere. As for inconsistencies, there are plenty, but I want to mention 3 big ones that really bothered me so you can get my point. In Season 3, Episode 2.5, we see photos of Francis and Franny in wild hair, but at 3:36, we see someone who's definitely Zagzagael here standing by someone who has Francis' haircut and same clothes. We can't see his eyes of course, and he's wearing a hat, but this is obviously Francis. If this is truly meant to be Francis, it means that he met Zagzagael before the events of Angel Hare, since Camael's friends in a photo with Francis and Miss Franny. Despite Camael saying he doesn't remember when his friend Francis left, but it was implied that it was long ago. Plus, I don't believe it's Camael because Gabby also isn't in any of these photos, and Camael's friend is blocked out, so it doesn't seem likely that he'd just be here unblocked, with the same hairstyle and clothes as Francis. So, in Season 1, Episode 2.5, at 0:34, when Francis says,
"Personally, I haven't met any angels other than Gabby,"
it makes a problem, and this can mean 2 things. Francis lied in Season 1, Episode 2.5, and thus he's an untrustworthy narrator, or this is just a mistake writing-wise, and both are bad. Francis lying is never accounted for, so it doesn't impact the story in any way, and it just makes trusting him, and probably Miss Franny, extremely difficult. While if it was a mistake, then that means the writers weren't paying enough attention to what they put in this mystery story, where he's supposed to look closely at clues. All these issues could be nullified if these 0.5 sections, as in the bonus letters or bonus episodes, were confirmed to be non-canon, but I didn't see anything in the videos or any of them that said that they were non-canon, unlike Your Angel is Here, which is explicitly stated to be non-canon. The second is a Jonah moment in Season 1, Episode 5.5. When Francis is asked about Jonah, he starts glitching out, which implies that Jonah's special in some way, and it lays credence to the thought that what's happening to him was personalized. Though, as we know from Season 2, Episode 6, this can't be the case because Gabby has the capability to help multiple people at once, meaning that Jonah just isn't special. And there are probably a lot of other kids that watch Angel Hare and got specific experiences with Gabby.
Millions of TVs, apparently, that don't run on time locks. The kid knows the lay of the new landscape. I don't know. I don't care for it myself.
This inconsistency is big and very annoying since it pushes for one conclusion, but then something that happens later totally destroys a piece of evidence. This will be a bigger part of the video for my final section, just you wait. The last one is Season 2 Episode 2's moment where Zagzagael unpauses the television at 2:12. While this moment itself is genuinely creepy and well done, thinking back to it after watching Season 3 makes it not make sense. Zag in Season 3 Episode 2 is scared about how different video games are from cartoons since they have limitations like
commands, controls, user input. We're at a huge disadvantage.
But isn't pausing a TV screen like how Jonah did exactly that? Commands, controls, and user input? Since Zagzagael could just bypass the same thing in one sense, why can't he in another? Like the first inconsistency, this can mean two things. The writers forgot again, or for no reason, a video game's commands, controls, and user inputs affect them differently than a show's, even though a show has constraints like the script, settings, backgrounds, pacing, and etc. Why not make these beings that can go through any kind of media and influence it heavily in their favor just immune to any kind of controls for consistency's sake? There are plenty of inconsistencies in Angel Hare, and if I check my notes super thoroughly again, I'm sure I'll piece together a few more, but these were just the biggest ones that hit me. On to something more noticeable and important, the characters. I have big issues with a lot of the characters, not because of what they do, but because how their actions are framed. And I also have a few consistency related criticisms for characters like Jonah or Zagzagael. It'd make the most sense to talk about the most important guy first, Jonah. I didn't talk much about Jonah because he's a mixed bag. Season 1 characterizes him strongly with his burning resolve to find out what happened in his childhood feeling real and easy to get behind. Or his moment in Season 3 where he effectively got through to Camael and helped him through blunt straight from the heart language. But I seriously dislike his character shift from Season 1 to 2 because it doesn't feel natural. This is because in Season 1 he felt like a regular guy going through something so disturbing that we couldn't imagine it. His dialogue and reaction to this felt realistic, properly scared, and down to earth given the horrible scenario. This feeling was implemented very well with moments like, "My mom and I'd forgotten, we weren't always alone." With how the text was executed, I could easily imagine his breath between the words, and the hesitation and pauses, which made me feel both ways that this was a person realizing something life-changing, horrible, and mysterious, and as if I could easily be Jonah in this instance, which related me to his character a lot and had me feeling for him. But Season 2 changes this down-to-earth vibe Jonah had by making him more extreme and theatric with his language. I can't imagine Season 2 Jonah saying a line like the "My mom and I" one, because he says stuff like, "Hoping she'll reappear, hoping I'll hope, but there's been no trace," or "My angel, my peace, was gone." And because of that, I can't imagine Season 1 Jonah saying a line like that either, because Season 2 Jonah sounds so dramatic in comparison to Season 1 Jonah. And some moments just felt totally inconsistent, like his moment in Season 2 Episode 5 when he said, "He was right, I never needed to know, not about my past, not hers," in reference to Zagzagael's ultimatum. Because the conclusion feels super sudden, and Season 1 Jonah's fire to figure out what the truth was never properly tackled, noticed, or quieted. Instead, a moment like this just suddenly extinguished it. Jonah from Season 1 and 2 feel like totally different characters. One needed to know while the other's fine without knowing. One's very dramatic while the other feels like a regular person like you and me. And one just speaks completely differently from the other. Plus, as I said earlier, it's unsatisfying in a mystery sense since the answer to the biggest thing Jonah wanted to know from Zagzagael is stop asking, it doesn't matter. And hell, it would have made more sense if he said, "I'll just have to ask Gabby then," to himself, but that doesn't happen. All that needs fixing here is his consistency issue and he'd be a perfectly fine character. Either have him always be dramatic or never have him be throughout the whole series, since I personally don't mind either version of Jonah much by themselves. But don't have the down-to-earth version of Jonah shift suddenly into the dramatic one with him saying absurd things like, "I feel sick watching this" in Season 2 Episode 2, a line that feels as if it came from a totally different person. Zagzagael. My main issue with Zag is that we're given no reason to trust him, all the reason to distrust him, and then the story wants us to trust him at the end. He came in after Gabby disappeared, which is rightfully weird as Jonah said, and then the guy says stuff like the "makes you tick" line or the ultimatum, which is manipulative and highly suspect for many reasons. Let's really think about this line from Season 2 Episode 5 since I haven't gone in depth on it yet.
Look, buddy, I need you to slow down and ask yourself an important question right now. Think about your little rabbit friend and really ask, do you want to know? Or do you want her back? Huh?
Every single word from this ultimatum is manipulative, suspicious, and gross, since Jonah just wanted to know the details about what he was, but he's hiding that. It's not even just that. We need to focus on how he referred to Gabby when he's talking to Jonah. Him saying, "your little rabbit friend," is highly alarming because it sounds like he's referring to Gabby as some kind of hostage or someone close to Jonah and not him, despite Gabby apparently being his friend. Anyone normal who wanted to help their supposed friend would just say their name. Even then, if Zagzagael just said, "think about Gabby," and ask, it's still suspicious because what does he have to hide? This right here is a concrete "these beings can't be trusted" moment, because why is information one way when Jonah's literally helping you save your supposed friend? It shouldn't work like that, and yet Jonah folds to this ultimatum immediately and never brings up questions about what they could be ever again. There are more moments like this, but the point is that, again, like most dark things in this series, this just lingers in the air and we never address it again or put any thought into it after it's said. We're just supposed to accept this and move on. Camael. I think he's the best implemented character, though I do have a few issues with the things that he says and how it's framed. In season 3, episode 6, when Camael says,
"You weren't the nicest kid. Lots of kids are horrible, actually. They don't know any better."
Gabby says,
"He was going through a lot."
and Camael says,
"Everyone is, Angel. That's why I was helping Segan."
This rubbed me the wrong way because he compares Segan's issues with Jonah's, and Segan's were with
Assertiveness, boundaries.
and Jonah's were with loneliness, violent thoughts, and being abused by his father. Him just retorting with "everyone is Angel" equalizes the problems Segan and Jonah went through, which doesn't feel fair since one's obviously way worse than the other. Plus, Camael definitely knew what Jonah was going through because he was able to give him what he needed in an attempt to help him with his interaction with friends despite never knowing him. If Camael knew what Jonah needed despite not talking to him like Gabby did for Jonah as a child, then I don't think it's an absurd thing to think that Camael knew what Jonah was going through as a child when he said "everyone is Angel." Something that goes hand in hand with this weird comment is when he said,
"Segan isn't your friend. You just used him to get out of your house, to play his games. Do you know how long he suffered? Seeking people's approval because of you?"
This is a really gross and manipulative line because Camael probably knows what Jonah was going through as a child with his father, and this feels like ignoring what happened and blaming Jonah as a child for what Segan's going through as an adult. I think it characterizes Camael well and makes him more complicated, since this is certainly a line spurred on partially because of his resentment for his friend quitting, but it's just kinda never addressed in any way or taken as seriously as it should be, so it just lingers as a result of that. Overall, I think Camael is the best character in the entire series, but you may be wondering why I haven't talked about the main mascot of Angel Hare yet, and that's because she's the most messed up, so bear with me. Gabby. Look, I don't think the writers intended for Gabby to be this evil, but if I laid out her actions and what they mean, you can't come to the conclusion that she's good. Gabby put herself in Jonah's life when he was a child, acted as an ever-dependable friend, a role model, and someone who always knew what he needed at every given time. She knew he was lonely, violent, and especially due to the abuse he was suffering, vulnerable and easy to mold in whatever way she'd want, which is what she did when she pushed Jonah to end his father's life. With all these factors listed out, this clearly identifies her as a groomer. She came into a vulnerable kid's life and pushed him into killing his father with a weapon that had to be assembled, i.e. a gun.
Now that we've got the pieces apart, let's think of somewhere to hide them where nobody can use them for harm.
And I say that this is extra bad because she didn't even have to make him do it. Since she caused the flood, she can influence the real world, so why couldn't she have just killed his dad? Outside of that massive thing we should consider, Jonah probably wouldn't have done what he did if it wasn't for Gabby's influence, because how the hell would he have learned to take apart a gun and hide it? He was so young that he thought it'd be a good idea to put it in a toy chest.
No, not the toy chest in your room. It would be very incriminating.
Events-wise, we see that she's a manipulator that pushed a child into doing something horrendous, something he didn't even need to do because Gabby could have most likely done it herself if she thought it was really the right way to help him. She caused his mother to spiral, worry, and research endlessly on what Jonah's condition was, and she's why Jonah doesn't remember his childhood, because she removed his memories by Jonah's request, as if a child has the agency and level of understanding to make a decision as serious as that.
I was thinking the same thing. I'll help you however I can.
Gabby made Jonah dependent on her when he was a child because to Jonah she was his only friend since he didn't have anyone else to depend on. And she does the same thing in season 2 when Jonah lets her back into his life. He says things like, "My angel, my peace was gone," or "She was all I would ever need." This is obsessive dependent language, and it's clear that Gabby did the exact same thing she pulled off on Jonah as a child. This just isn't healthy, and it sounds like Jonah's crying about his loving wife of 30 years suddenly disappearing or dying, when really it's a cartoon character he's been talking to for probably a few weeks at this point. And despite Jonah being an adult now, Gabby's the one with meta-knowledge. She still knows everything Jonah needs to hear at any time, and she definitely knows that this isn't okay, since Jonah's a grown adult that should probably have some kind of support system or social group. In fact, Camael's the one that tries to help him with his friendship issues. If Camael, Segan's angel, knows that Jonah's struggling with friendships, then why didn't Gabby? Or did she? And since she definitely does, why did she never actually try to help Jonah outside of just being there for him? And yet, after all of this, the show never frames this as something unhealthy or strange, even though it is. And instead it wants you to believe that this is an alright and good relationship. Gabby always is there for him, anytime he calls, always offers positive affirmation, always knows what Jonah needs, and she never truly tries to help him with his issues, unlike Camael, who attempts to. That's more akin to Gabby being a service for Jonah and absolutely not a friend, and Jonah already acknowledges this in season 2 at the start because he refers to her as his friend indirectly only once. He always uses language in reference to Gabby being his. She was all I would ever need, a perfect escape, my angel, my peace. The idea of Jonah calling her his friend originates mostly from Zagzagael saying that the two of them are friends in season 2 episode 5. After Zagzagael says it, that's what he starts going with more, despite his odd language in reference to her, especially at the start of season 2 episode 5. Even then, in season 3, he acknowledges this when Camael helps him, but it doesn't really change anything. Gabby does things emotionally for Jonah that no human being can possibly compete with. No human is always going to positively affirm you, or know what you need at every moment, or always have good guidance or anything like that, especially to this degree. She has caused Jonah to be totally obsessed with her and yet still lonely because she fulfills everything emotionally that Jonah could ever want, and clearly from what happens in season 2 and 3, he never wants to let go of that because it's all he has. It's why he reacts in such an extremely volatile way when Gabby doesn't appear when he calls. It's messed up when I put it in plain, blunt, straight words, but that's literally what Gabby does and is in reality to Jonah. With the music and dialogue by Jonah in season 1 episode 6, it goes from him wanting to figure out answers to him simply wanting to see Gabby again, and we're supposed to feel for that. Season 2 is all about finding Gabby because she's framed as Jonah's friend by the story and mostly Zagzagael, not only ignoring his obsessive remarks towards her at the very start, but also putting aside what happened in his childhood in season 1. And season 3 treats her like she's a regular good person. But if we're honest and take a look at her actions and events stripped back from the nice framing, it's toxic, suspicious, and above all, extremely inhuman. The closest thing I can compare Gabby to is ChatGPT. No human can compete with its ability to just know everything, or its availability, or its ability to be customized, or the fact that it will always be positive to you. That's the kind of relationship the story wants you to root for, and no amount of framing can fix that. That was a lot, I know. But all of this feeds into the main mystery of the show that I've been alluding to this entire time. And since it's so in-depth and complicated, I think that understanding my thought process fully would help. This series is really hard to critique when it comes to the story because it's not straightforward. It's a mystery show where you're supposed to piece together what happened, so what you think happened could be totally different from me since the only thing I did to understand it was watch it 3 times, and on a third rewatch, I spent 5 days writing notes of everything happening in depth. Despite that, to you my critiques of the series might be like someone critically analyzing the first 4 FNAF game stories with nothing but their mind and a few theories, but a little less extreme. So here's how I'm gonna do things. In my 51-page long notes document recording my thought process and everything that seemed important in my previous 2 rewatches up to that point, I'm going to think of the story like this. What's the most obvious, well-evidenced, least speculation or assumption-fueled theory as to what's happening? I did this so I'd never come to conclusions that make less sense than something else, and so that what I'm saying has the best basis in what we learned directly from the series, or so that I don't have an odd basis or weak evidence for what I'm saying happened. For example, it wouldn't make sense to think of an Islamic idea of what angels are like, since season 1 of Angel Hare is a Christian show that takes ideas directly from our theology, and so because of that, it'd make far more sense to use Christianity as a basis in figuring out what Gabby is than she claims to be an angel. And conclusions that have a ton of evidence against them or fully rely on assumptions like Gabby and Zagzagael actually being angels, or assuming the show has some alternative thought on what an angel is, will be thrown out because there's more evidence against Gabby being an angel than her being one, and believing the show has an alternate thought on what angels are is an assumption that ignores a lot of hints, clues, and evidence. I decided to critique the show in this way when discussing its main mystery because I'm trying to be as fair and as objective as possible, and I decided to take the story's mystery as seriously as I possibly could because I care a lot about Angel Hare and I want to know the answers to certain mysteries, more notably the ones surrounding the nature of what the angels actually are. But I've come to the conclusion that we can't reasonably know or deduce it because the hints we're given are totally incoherent and contradict from season to season. Not angels, so what are they? Season 1. Let's look at this in a logical way because while we can piece together what the angels are in each season separate from one another, we can't reasonably do this for the whole show since it changes every season with new evidence. This will be my most in-depth analysis of the events of the story and my methodology for how I came to these conclusions, so please bear with me. In Season 1, the most obvious answer is that Gabby is a demon in a Christian sense. I looked at it in this way not only because she's a character from a Christian show, but also because of Francis' explanation of how demons work in Season 1 episode 2.5.
Sometimes they look like an opportunity or a feeling.
Is exactly how he thinks demons operate. Ephesians in Season 1 episode 3 and Revelations being mentioned in Season 1 episode 4 rule out any possibility of Angel Hare being theologically Jewish because that religion rejects the New Testament. For full clarification's sake, our theology and the Jewish ones are not the same or interchangeable despite us having a similar origin and us sharing the New Testament, which is why they still follow the rabbinical law but we don't, for example. We are completely different religions in many, many ways. With the theologically Christian language used and other things like Jonah being named after a minor prophet or Gabby being named after the Archangel Gabriel, we can conclude that the most obvious thing to look through when it comes to answering the question of what Gabby is a lens of Christianity. But through that lens, it becomes painfully obvious that she's a demon. There's tons of evidence for this throughout the entire series, but I want to fixate on Season 1, Episode 3 through 5. In 3, Gabby instructs Jonah to take apart something heavy that should be held by its handle, something that'd be incriminating if someone found it, and something that she herself refers to as a weapon at 2:31 by saying,
I hope we'll never have to draw a weapon.
This is obviously a gun, and in 4 she says,
They are going to ask you what happened, Jonah.
while making a loophole of the point of scripture when it tells us not to lie.
Honesty is important, Jonah. You should always tell the truth. If you know you're going to be in trouble, you should create a truth for later.
Will you ever forgive me?
Go to a friend's house when something bad happens, and you won't have to lie about it when they ask you later.
And afterwards he goes on to commit a murder on someone close to him. We can deduce that they were close due to the lyrics in Season 1, Episode 4 saying at the start, although I love you, it's goodbye, and the events of that episode. Outside of this, the fact that Jonah murdered someone is solidified by two things. He says that he forgot he and his mom weren't always alone, and in 5 we see that his mom bought tips about how to help a violent child in relation to TV exposure.
Children witnessing violent events on television, whether it's exposure to the television programming itself or the family and social conditions that lead to children spending a lot of time watching it.
Who he murdered was his abusive father, which we can see in Season 1 Episode 2 when Gabby helps Jonah with hiding from him, and I say it's his dad since Gabby refers to him as he.
Now you don't have to be scared, even if he finds you.
Gabby could only do this because Jonah was a lonely, unstable, abused, and ultimately vulnerable kid. He said it was nobody else around all that time in Season 1 Episode 3, which points to him potentially being neglected as well. Gabby knew everything Jonah needed, so she knew that all she needed to do was position herself in his life as a friend, mentor, and someone who would always help and be dependable since most likely nobody to him in his life was at the time. This created a weird dynamic where child Jonah looked up to Gabby, got close to her, and could have easily been convinced to do horrible things like murder because she said so. And this clearly took a while because Jonah thought the main character of Angel Hare just shared a name with him until the changes within the broadcasting became more and more obvious as Jonah got used to her. I don't think there's any other fair term for what this is other than, again, grooming. And we can look back at his mom's tapes in Season 1 Episode 5 where she tries to question Keith Publishing about the show her son watched since they republished it, but she fails to get any answers. Finally, we can see that Gabby can affect the real world when at least asked, and she's heavily implied to be the one that erased the evidence of the police reports via the flood so that Jonah can't go back and relive what happened. I say this because in Season 1 Episode 4 she asked Jonah,
What would you like me to do?
Followed up by the flooding of the municipal building. There's so much more evidence, and I relegated it mostly to Season 1 for this, but if we take from just Season 2, then Season 2 Episode 6 confirms the idea that Gabby made Jonah forget about everything by him saying, you should make me forget again, proving that she can affect the real world, not to mention his fear of Zagzagael, partially stemming from his belief that Zag could do something to him. And Season 2 Episode 0 has Jonah saying that Easter was his first time alone with only Gabby to talk to, proving that he was indeed a really lonely kid if he was literally alone on a holiday. But from here we can make a simple conclusion. An actual angel wouldn't ever subvert the point of scripture, groom a kid into doing a murder no matter what, and they never focus on specific people like this. If we go further, then it's also hard to believe that Gabriel, the messenger of God, is Gabby, since her messages are incoherent, which is what we see in Season 2 Episode 3 at 150.
Let's have a look. And you said that was the first morning she didn't... well, ain't this bupkis? You'd think a kid's flick would keep it simple.
Gabriel's messages were never vague or caused confusion, which is a demonic quality, and thus she just can't be an angel. Francis drew that, which is an image from a dream that Gabby bestowed upon him, and not even Zagzagael, who's the same being as her, understood what it meant, or what it was. She has to be a demonic entity that's attached to Jonah. I can see one retort for this being the fact that Gabby doesn't do anything evil after Season 1, but a demon's whole goal is just to make you fail at establishing a connection with God, and since Gabby makes Jonah obsessed with her in adulthood, she's clearly succeeding. Demons are evil, but they don't always have to act obviously evil. I could go on forever detailing specific things that prove that Gabby is a demonic entity, but this is enough. But despite all this proof and these logical explanations, it totally contradicts with the most obvious conclusion you can draw from Season 2. Season 2! How, when Season 2 has evidence for the most obvious demon theory, like the Francis drawing, or basically every suspicious thing Zagzagael does that makes Jonah extremely uncomfortable, since angels, when they appear, immediately comfort those that they're appearing to. If Zag was an angel, he would calm Jonah down and make sure he wasn't scared, which is what we see consistently in scripture. Even though it makes a lot of sense, they just can't be demons for two reasons. In Season 2 Episode 6, Gabby's limited by the internet and she's not attached or haunting Jonah, which is antithetical to demons since they usually latch onto or possess people, which is how they put people under their more extreme effects. Outside of that, why would a metaphysical being be limited by the internet? And if you're thinking, oh, she's his guardian angel then that can't be the case either, since they only guard a single person according to Catholic theology, since they're Catholic. So with it being impossible for them to be demons or guardian angels, what if Gabby really was some weird distorted fictional version of the Archangel Gabriel despite everything? Even with that considered, it doesn't explain Zagzagael. We only know 3 angels, Saint Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. That's it, since those are the only ones named in the Bible, and though niche sects like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church accept books with different angel names like the Book of Enoch, the name Zagzagael doesn't pop up there either. Neither does Camael, as they both come from the Kabbalah, which is an ancient body of Jewish mystical teachings. But as we established earlier, Judaism and Christianity aren't interchangeable, and the story's obviously not Jewish. So one of 3 things can now be true. One is that the story takes up its own idea of what an angel is, or a fictionalized version of Christianity. So according to the story's rules, these are angels, but that means that we could never reasonably figure out for ourselves what they are, since it never clarifies that, and it's clues for us to look at this from any real Christian lens or red herrings. 2, the creators intentionally added all of these things as real hints that something's super wrong here, but Season 3 puts that into serious question, which I'll get into later. Or 3, you were never supposed to look at the story and figure out what these beings are from a Christian lens, despite it obviously inviting you to do so. The strongest, most obvious explanation was wiped out, so what can we use to now figure out what these beings are? Well, the evidence is a lot weaker since there's just less of it, and honestly we've basically got no ground to stand on from here. But a big piece we get is in Season 2 Episode 2's moment where Zagzagael asks Jonah,
"Are you with Wreath?"
It doesn't seem like much, but it implies that Wreath knows about and has at least interacted with Zagzagael and probably the other angels too. We don't know the extent, but if Miss Franny's being honest in Season 2 Episode 4.5 about her not knowing about Wreath.
We've got Steph and Jano asking what the story is behind Wreath. Wreath? Sorry, if it's not in my Rolodex, I don't know him.
We can deduce that the angels come first and the Frans came after. So potentially these are beings created to be partners with the angels. This all requires some speculation, which is really annoying, so again bear with me. Potentially, Wreath made entities of questionable morality that can affect the real world and called them angels. Since they have counterparts, those being the Frans, that pushes us away from Christian theology since that's unseen within it. And since these beings only constrain themselves to Wreath-made products, even though their mission and influence could be far more successful and easy if they transferred themselves to larger cartoons. I think that works in the favor of this potential explanation for the nature of these beings. Because while these odd beings choose weird, old, niche shows if they want to influence people, as opposed to more popular, well-known ones so they can influence as many as possible. The only problem I see here is the names, because why would Wreath name Zagzagael and Camael after angels from Jewish mysticism? That's super random, but if I ignore that, then Season 3 destroys this entire thing too because of its ending and its premise. Season 3. The last story basically hinges off a single heavy line and a little extra evidence that implies that the Frans at least didn't know of Wreath if Mrs. Franny is telling the truth. So basically mostly speculation, which sucks, but that's all we've got to go off of by this point. But Season 3 destroys this too, since it opens up the possibility of them just transferring themselves to larger cartoons or something due to it taking place in Hyrax on the Rocks, a video game that has nothing to do with Wreath. Camael isn't even a different kind of angel with different origin or something. His friend comes from Wild Hare, and we see this in Season 3 episode 2.5, so Cam probably also came from that too. Or some other Wreath product. This means Camael and his friend jumped from Wild Hare or maybe Angel Hare by this point of Jonah's childhood into a video game floppy disk for Segan, which opens up the possibility of Segan having either talked to Zagzagael or Gabby as well if these beings don't have infinite range or something, and if Segan owned or watched Wild Hare as a child. But that's out of the question right now. This can mean one of two things. Wreath made these entities of unknown moral character with angelic qualities that can go into any media from any range, assuming Segan never watched Angel Hare or Wild Hare, and they can impact the real world with their only weakness being them not being able to interact with tons of people at once. Or Wreath found these unknown spiritual entities and for some reason they decided to possess Wreath cartoons primarily, though they could possess whatever they wanted. Either way, now both conclusions are mostly speculation, which shows how loose the evidence has gotten in comparison to Season 1 because we now have no basis with which to search for what these things are. But even the unknown moral character thing is destroyed by the last episode with Camael saying,
"But it worked, didn't it? You feel stronger about your relationships now. I know what I'm doing. People like to win."
The only possible, reasonable way to interpret this after everything Camael went through and did, which by the way is like 15 years of staying stuck in a cartridge and having no breaks, is that the only reasonable interpretation is that these are entities that are trying to do good. That's it. These beings, according to the story, are actually good and probably real angels. By what metric? I'm not sure. I guess the stories despite its hints. And it means that we have to ignore every single suspicious hint, all of the weird manipulation Gabby did to Jonah, lines from Zagzagael like sharing something important lets others learn about what makes you tick, or even things that feel fully like direct evidence with the confusing, irrelevant dream Gabby gave to Francis that communicates that she's obviously some kind of demonic force. At every single turn, Angel Hare tells you to be suspicious, to think about what these beings are, and most importantly, to not trust them, but then it ends with telling us to trust that they're good without even making it clear as to what these beings actually are because it's incoherent. Segment conclusion. We know what they can't be, but not what they are. Their names, actions, what they say, and how they operate are all antithetical to actual angels, and yet they want us to accept that they are angels, despite so many suspicious moments and hints that they give us that can't be interpreted as anything but suspicious moments or hints that something is wrong. I'd have no problem with accepting the twist of these beings really are good, since that's unique and interesting, but the show doesn't support this, since there are just too many actions and lines that are obviously and absolutely suspicious and alarming. And Gabby pushing Jonah to kill his dad just because he was abusive isn't good. She still caused a child to murder someone instead of maybe trying to get help in some alternative way. That was bad, traumatizing, especially to his mother, as we can see from Season 1 Episode 5, and unnecessary. With mountains of evidence backing the exact opposite conclusion of them being demonic entities, and then evidence against them being Wreath made or any other conclusion you can think of, Angel Hare makes the biggest mystery of the show impossible to solve due to the potential answer of it fluctuating every season. You'll certainly get tons of different answers for what these beings could actually be from people who finish the show. Maybe some people think they're angels, maybe some thinks they are demons, or some think that they're guardian angels, or some people think they're Wreath made. But no conclusion is coherent because there's plenty of evidence against every single one, and it feels like the show just tells you to stop asking. Jonah had a fire to know what happened in his childhood, one that felt as if it could never be extinguished until Season 2 Episode 5 when Zagzagael answers none of his questions and basically tells him to shut up, and suddenly Jonah's alright with not knowing. Is the point of this that we're not supposed to know or agree that it doesn't matter, even though it's clearly been built up as a massive thing we'd want answers to? Why the hell is the point of the mystery to not know the answer to the mystery? It's annoying and makes me not want to root for any of the angels, since deep down I still feel as if they have ulterior motives. I feel as if Camael was going to push Zagzagael to do something horrible, and even by the end I can't bring myself to trust Zagzagael despite him never doing anything blatantly wrong, because he refuses to even explain anything about himself. Restating this, I'd have no issues if they were revealed to be some kind of good beings, but the show shoots itself in the foot with these beings doing bad or suspicious actions, and then expecting us to ignore them and accept that they're trying to do good. The entire reason why the show even took off in the first place and got popular was because we weren't supposed to trust Gabby or the angels, but then it does a sudden 180 and tells you to trust them in the end. What could have fixed this? Despite how much I spoke on this, I think the issues could have been fixed in two different ways. Angel Hare uses heavy-handed, objectively suspicious language so that when it reviews that the angels are good, it feels surprising. So because that's what it does in both Season 1 with Gabby and Season 2 with Zaggy, all we have to do is make the implications and language used less dark for both, especially in Season 1, so that the season's ending can feel well warranted when we go back and recontextualize what the angels were saying. Instead of Jonah accepting an unknown entity back into his life that caused him to both kill his father and traumatize his mom, since as he says in Season 1 Episode 5, he doesn't want to reintroduce her to that kind of stuff, we could realize with a softer, less suspicious approach to these clues that this being was actually good and meant no harm. Maybe Gabby simply didn't cause Jonah to kill his dad, which traumatizes his mom, and instead she just made him forget about her for a reason that he wants to understand. It's mysterious, but it can be pointed as a for the greater good sort of thing, like maybe because Gabby felt like she was holding Jonah's development back, or because Jonah was getting too old to be under her care, which is an idea expressed in Season 2 Episode 6. And if Zaggy wasn't suspiciously hiding stuff about himself like in Season 2 Episode 5, or saying stuff like the sharing something important lets others make you, the tick line in Season 2 Episode 2, then the same thing could have been done. And then by the end, it'd be more fair to believe Camael when he says he was trying his best to help Zagzagael, because from what we saw from Gabby and Zagzagael, that's exactly what they were doing. And all the suspect things they were doing previously with new context would make more sense. In short, if it dialed back the bad, scary, and questionable implications, then this wouldn't be an issue, and the Season 3 ending could have been a believable answer to the mystery. They're angels, or at least some kind of other being that wants to help. Or two, the writers could have had Jonah go through with trying to figure out what Gabby is. Maybe he asks questions to Gabby and they have genuine disagreements and arguments about her not telling him what happened in his childhood. And after that, he realizes how dangerous Gabby is, since she can affect the real world and always knows what he needs, which implies that she knows about his whereabouts outside of what he directly tells her. That's creepy, and it would have been interesting to see Jonah try to get answers and his reaction to Gabby potentially admitting that she pushed Jonah to kill his father. And due to what Season 1 sets up, it'd be extremely interesting if they had a conversation about her erasing his memories, despite him being a child at the time, even though a child wouldn't know or be able to handle the weight of that kind of decision. It could be played from an angle of Gabby attempting to push Jonah to do what she thought was right for the situation, or something more sinister, though of course this practically makes a different story, since Zagzagael and Camael wouldn't need to enter it, as the main horror would be from Gabby herself. And though this direction would change a lot, it'd make a lot more sense since it actually follows through on the things that the writers themselves spent an entire season building up. I bring these two fixes up because Angel Hare, when it comes to his mysteries in general, has two big issues: failure to follow through and heavy-handedness. It's both of these, since its heavy-handed hints push us to not trust the angels to the point that when it wants us to, we reasonably can't due to everything we've seen before, and its failure to follow through is emphasized when none of its darkness is answered or confronted. It just sits there and is sidelined. After Season 1, we never explore the idea of Jonah killing his dad again, and after Season 2, it never thinks about Zagzagael's many weird lines. Angel Hare's dark, but it's too hopeful since it never answers for its darkness, so either make it less dark or simply answer for it. Conclusion: Angel Hare is still one of my favorite web series ever despite all my issues with it, and honestly, taking these notes and getting this hyper specific about it gave me more reasons to enjoy it. Like I said, I thought Season 3 wasn't good until I took notes on it and really thought about it. And thanks to the notes, I gained a lot more appreciation for Season 1 before Episode 6. Thanks to all of this, I now have a greater understanding of a good web series that I actually like and can say despite all of its flaws, it's good. And I was only able to sit with the series so long because I liked it so much. And I'm fully open to disagreements in the comments. This video was easily my most thorough one yet, but if you think I missed something major, then say so. I suggest you check out Angel Hare yourself, and if you liked the video, then like it and subscribe. I'll see you guys in whatever I post next.